All right, welcome back to the All About RFID series. I'm Kyle Stanford, your RFID solutions architect, and we are here today to talk about antennas. They are the unsung hero of the RFID world, often an afterthought, often the thing that screws up a deployment. So, antennas, they come in a lot of different form factors, polarizations, different gains. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those categories and see what we can explain to you. This is going to get a little more nerdy than our normal conversation, so I'm going to probably use a bunch of slides. So let's start with just antennas in general. What are they? So readers, we know our readers, right? They are the smarts. They are the brains of the operation. Then they're going to have a cable that's going to go out to an antenna. If the reader is the brain, the antenna is the mouth and the ears. It's the thing that shouts at tags, and it's the thing that listens for tags, right? So because of that, you've got to choose the right antenna. It's the one actually doing the work. It's the workhorse in the field actually shouting out the RF signals. Choosing the right antenna for the right situation is key. So first we'll start with polarization. Polarization is the way in which the radio waves come out of this antenna. Typically what you're going to see is two types. That is linear and circular. We're going to talk about linear first. So I'm going to show a slide with the linear. Linear is essentially the idea that the waves come out in almost a straight manner. All that energy is sent into the wave and it comes out in what you would think of as a wave, right? Because of that, linear is apt to travel further, but it does not deal as well with tags that are not orientated perfectly. So on that slide, you can see now that tag is horizontal while that antenna is vertical, and you're going to get less read rate at that point. It's going to be harder for that same RF energy to energize that tag and for the antenna to hear it when the tag beacons back out. The other side of that is circular. So circular polarization, if linear is just shooting straight out, then circular is basically a corkscrew. So it's using some of that energy to essentially corkscrew that signal as it comes out of the antenna. This is great for tag orientation because it's going to catch those tags on different orientations. But because it's using some of that energy to create that corkscrew effect, it's going to be less ideal for range. That's not to say it's not ideal for range. You can get a lot of range out of a circular antenna, but it's less ideal for range than linear. So linear, good, but it takes some tag discipline. This is when your tags are being presented to the antenna in a uniform fashion. So maybe something like a conveyor, a linear antenna would do perfectly fine. But if it's something where the tags are presented in different fashions, all different order, hung different ways, then your circular antenna is probably going to be the one you want to go with. So that is different types of polarization in antennas. But now we're going to talk about the actual form factor of some types of antennas that you're going to see in the real world. I'm not going to go through everything. There's a whole bunch of different things that I'm not going to cover here. These are the ones that I'm going to see on a day-to-day basis in the RFID world. We're going to start with patch. So patch antennas are essentially a big square. They're pretty easy to spot. They're usually just big white squares made by all different manufacturers. Of course, Zebra makes some, other manufacturers make some. While we are loyal to Zebra on the RFID reader side, we are less loyal on the antenna side because Zebra does not make an antenna for every use case. They make a bunch. Here's some of their portfolio. But they do not make an antenna for every use case. Because of that, we have to go around and look at different form factors. Patch antenna is very common. They are, again, the workhorse of the RFID world. They're what you're going to see just about every RFID use case. They shoot RF out like a spotlight. So here's an RF antenna, and here it is shooting out. So that is essentially a big cone coming out, right? So this can be linear or circular, but that's just the polarization. The actual RF energy coming out is going to come out like a cone. So it's going to expand as it gets further away. It's going to use all that power to just shoot it out in one direction. It's just going to kind of listen for anything it hears. So these are good at portals, dock doors, conveyors. They're pretty much used in probably 85% of the projects that I work on until we get into some special use case antennas. One of those is near field. So a near field antenna is the idea that instead of shooting out a big cone, I'm essentially making an electromagnetic bubble over an antenna. This means instead of those waves traveling out, I'm just kind of creating a bubble over an antenna. This is great for exactly what you'd expect, tiny items. So this is your jewelry, some liquids, individual tools needing to be detected without detecting tools nearby. If a patch antenna is a big spotlight, then your near field antennas are your magnifying glasses. They're just looking for that very small area of read range. So We also have something pretty cool, a newer technology, not newer, but a newer implemented technology by us called wave antennas. So wave antennas are also called traveling wave antennas. They're directional, very directional, and they have a linear range that they're going to cover. So if you think creating a skirt over a doorway without detecting the hallway or the room it's in, you're just trying to present a small area that you want to cover, very narrow range. Wave antennas are good at this. They actually look pretty cool too. The linear read zone, narrow area, focused, also makes them really good at gates, really good at dock doors, portals, even some conveyors. They have these essentially wave antennas deployed within a box, right? And then we have phased array antennas. I'm not going to get too deep into this because this starts dealing with the RTLS world. Essentially, usually the phased array antenna, at least in Zebra's deployments, the reader is actually combined in it. So here's an example of a phased array reader from Zebra. This reader has multiple antenna elements with it, both linear and circular polarized, with different angles of attack, and it's able to take all of that data and not just say, hey, I read an item, but say, hey, I read an item over here, or I read an item over here. And in fact, the ATR 7000 that I'm showing can actually detect an item if you deploy a bunch of servers locally moving XYZ coordinates, and without any servers deployed locally, it can actually detect directionality. So it can say I traveled from the left side of this hallway to the right side of this hallway. Very cool technology. It's kind of the next iteration in RFID. It's almost a smart antenna. It's using the best of both worlds, the linear, the circular, all the different angles of attack of those antennas, and able to detect on which antenna it reads it best and do some calculations in its internal brain and say, all right, I think the tag's right here. Very cool technology. Much more expensive than just a patch antenna deployment, but it is out there. We do support the ATR 7000 and the RedBeam software. They also come in a lot of other variants. So there's a lot of other technologies out there that tout RTLS, and they're deploying it with phased array antennas. Okay, so that's just some common types of antennas that you're going to see out in the real world today in the RFID. Next, we'll talk about gain. This one's pretty simple. Gain is how loud I shout and how loud something needs to be for me to hear it. A high gain antenna is typically going to be bigger. With that high gain antenna, you're going to be able to send the signal out stronger, right? And you're going to be able to hear when that tag responds better than a low gain antenna, or definitely better than something like a near field antenna, which has almost no gain, right? So gain is going to be rated in different things, dBi, dBiC. You want to compare apples to apples. So if you're looking at spec sheets, make sure you're comparing dBi to dBi or dBiC to dBiC. They're actually different calculations. I'm not going to get into that today. Some other little things to worry about. You have the connectors, right? So most readers, every Zebra fixed reader is going to have an RPTNC connector on one end. On the antenna, you may not have RPTNC. This one happens to, but this one right behind me does not. It has an N-type connector, right? So you need to have a cable that's going to connect your reader, right, to your antenna, and it may be different depending on which antennas you're deploying. Also, that cable matters. Cheap RF doesn't like cheap cables. It will have massive attenuation or just loss on the cable. You can use bad connectors and bad cable and cut your signal in half right from the start. Thicker cable is going to travel longer with less attenuation. So you'll hear cables rated in something like LMR 240, LMR 400. This is essentially an LMR 240, right? Here's a cable right here. LMR 240 with an RPTNC end and an SMA end for an SMA antenna. LMR 240 is nice and easy and malleable. LMR 400 is about the size of my finger, and it's harder to bend around corners, but it's going to let that same signal that maybe travels 30 feet on this cable travel 50 feet on an LMR 400 cable with the same amount of loss. So get the right cable for the situation too. So antennas matter. Choose the right polarization, form factor, cables, connectors, gain. If it matters, choose the right brand, the cosmetic look, right? These are going to be hanging in the ceiling where people can see them. Don't hang a big white antenna inside of a dark black movie theater. Doesn't make sense. There's a lot to consider when choosing antennas. It's RFID readers, RFID tags, they get all the glory. RFID antennas are the things that can really make the deployment. I know I keep saying that about every different thing, but they are the thing that can really make the deployment work correctly. So next up, we're going to be talking about what's on my tag in RFID encoding. What is actually on that tag? You've heard me say unique ID up to this point, but what does that actually mean? So connect with me on LinkedIn, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.